Following the colossal success of the Syrian opposition in taking control over Syria and taking down the regime of Bashar al-Assad, something that took many by surprise, it didn't take Israel long to start attacking Syria heavily and illegally seizing further territories inside of Syria, apart from the Golan Heights that Israel occupies for over 50 years. Now Israel's conducting more attacks inside of Syria with the recent attack in Aleppo. Israel is targeting strategic locations inside of Syria, primarily military targets. Their claim is that they're worried that these military establishments and military facilities and weapon manufacturing facilities will reach the hands of the new government. Israel always says that the new people in power in Syria are a gang of jihadis, and they're not convinced by their change of tone and the way they approach things when it comes to local governing and their relationship with global countries as well. The Israeli foreign minister, the Israeli defense minister, alongside many in the Israeli top leading figures, they said that they don't have trust in these people, and as a matter of fact, they're warning from them. There have been lots of criticism when it comes to the new Syrian ruler, Ahmad al-Sharaa'S, more known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani, who led this armed opposition with this very quick control over Syria and taking down Bashar al-Assad, of being somewhat quiet about the Israeli aggression against Syria. Him, alongside other figures in his government, said that they will be taking diplomatic moves against Israel and that they want to resolve things in a diplomatic manner when it comes to Israel occupying parts of Syria. But now it appears to be that the tone and the talks that are not public are different. Now, this is not something surprising. Abu Muhammad al-Julani, well, he had several statements in the past that clarified his vision when it comes to Syria and Palestine, and this was one of them.
بإذن الله لا نصل فقط دمشق بل إن القدس تنتظرنا بإذن الله تعالى.
So the man was very clear. That video is from about 6 years ago, saying that after Damascus, they will be going to Jerusalem. However, they were focusing on Bashar al-Assad, and they're not trying to wage an immediate war with Israel because their chances are quite slim in succeeding. And after the suffering of the Syrian people, with approximately 1 million people dead, 9 million refugees, hundreds of thousands missing, many people were in prison, and total destruction, the Syrians want to rebuild their country. But that's something that Israel doesn't want in its area, and they do not want to give an opportunity for any country to be independent around them. And although many figures from Western countries are coming to visit Syria in recent weeks, it appears that Israel is a key subject in the talks between them and Ahmad al-Sharaa'S. And there was a report in one of the biggest Arabic newspapers, Al-Quds Al-Arabi, about these meetings and what happened in the background that wasn't really published. And this came based on sources that were present inside these meetings and what some of them gave as feedback following the talks they had with Ahmad al-Sharaa'S. And he made some very interesting statements when it comes to Israel, and with the prospect of potentially having Iran back in Syria with the new Syrian government. So the title was Al-Sharaa'S to his visitors about opportunistic Israel. It is a futility that may backfire. Our factions are jihadists and do not need a state or army. Do you want Iran to return? And they started by saying that the trend that Syrian leader Ahmad al-Sharaa'S visitors hear from foreigners and Westerners, specifically regarding the Israeli file, is keen to repeat the statement that the priority of the new Syrian government is local development and not opening a front of military conflict with Israel. Those close to Shara' believe that his repetition of this issue with French, German, Canadian, and British delegations that recently visited him was motivated by the desire to send a message to the Israelis through their European friends that is characterized by softness and the delineation of priorities, but that may become malicious in some details or embarrassing, according to this report. Al-Sharaa'S reports that Israel's policies of besieging the people of Gaza Strip and insisting on occupying 7 very small villages in the border with Lebanon have ended over the past 2 decades, with the Iranian Revolutionary Guards on Israel's borders with Lebanon and Iran being close to its border with the Gaza Strip because of those Israeli practices that Al-Sharaa'S says are not characterized by any wisdom. He added and asked the members of the British delegation he met, "Does your country want some of us Syrians to start looking for allies from the Shiites, Iran, and what was called the Axis, so that you can obtain an environment that allows the return of the Iranian, Iraqi, and Lebanese armed militias?" Al-Sharaa'S, based on circles he met directly recently on the Israeli issue, believes that the military capabilities that Israeli army bombed after and before taking control of Damascus on the part of the Free Revolution are a matter related to the relationship that was secret between the ousted regime and the Israelis. And on that front, there has been also a report that Bashar al-Assad himself gave details to Israel regarding locations of his strategic military equipment so that they do not target him, or so that he can have a safe passage when it comes to leaving the country after the opposition started to march towards Damascus. Now, there were other reports as well that dealing started to be initiated between al-Assad and Israel, apart from the previous agreements they had when it comes to the Golan Heights, and the fact that Syria did not take any action to take back and liberate the Golan Heights during Bashar al-Assad's role and his father's role as well. There were also suspicions that new deals were in the making between the Assad government, Israel, and other countries too. However, Bashar al-Assad left now, but Israel is still attacking. Now, there were many statements coming from Israel previously that they would prefer Bashar al-Assad over anyone who they don't know, because they know Bashar al-Assad and their borders with Syria were very secure to a very large extent for the past 57 years. And now that they have new powers coming in with a very militant background, they are more worried. Now, this report continued. "We do not consider the capabilities of the former Syrian army to be anything but part of the heritage that the Syrian people want to turn the page on. And Israel, in the way it's behaving when it comes to Syria, is opportunistic." He said that the Israeli behavior is opportunistic and will lead to ambiguous results if it continues, which may include the return of armed Shiites deep inside the borders with Syria and Israel into Lebanon, and it may also include the conversion of some moderate factions that now want to focus on building Syria to an extremist ideology that does not need an army and a stable state in order to create new challenges to Israeli society. This is an indirect threat of more leniency and coordination when it comes to Iran and when it comes to Hezbollah. There have already been reports of coordination and confirmation coming from senior Hezbollah figures about their coordination with HTS during their takeover, in particular in Homs, and how senior figures from both sides had agreements being made and no fighting happened between them. You're talking about two movements that had clashes, bloody clashes, for the past 14 years, or a big part of those years, but clearly things have changed. There were also reports of continued weapon smuggling from the Syrian borders into Lebanon that Israel attacked in recent weeks. So is this a threat to escalate or even have more relations with these groups, although again the Syrian people are primarily focusing on rebuilding their country and turning a new page and giving new hope. Syria has a lot of destruction and they have a lot of work to do, and the last thing they want is a new war. However, Israel, an extremist, terrorist, genocidal, neo-colonialist entity, does not like or fathom the idea of having any sort of freedom next to it, or people governing with freedom and by their own will, and having institutions and anything functional. Israel wants destroyed, split entities near it, and that explains their constant coordination or attempts of coordination with movements to hinder the prospect of any security in the countries around them, let alone the fact that Israel attacked every country around it since its inception and illegal occupation of Palestine. The report continued, and it has many important points, and that's the reason that I'm addressing the majority of these points. Leaders of the Syrian revolution, alongside Shara, have hinted that opposition factions, numbering more than 100,000 fighters, are the backbone of the future Syrian army. That's something the Syrian government is working hard on, disarming all of the armed groups, and now HTS already declared that they're disarming and having one Ministry of Defense. They're having slight problems when it comes to the northeastern part of Syria and some parts in the south of Syria. However, talks are still ongoing, and in the case of the SDF, they are still fighting. The fighting is still happening between them, and Turkey is backing the Syrian side. And they continued, but these forces are not regular currently and operate under the doctrine of guerrilla warfare. They do not need camps, facilities, or airports if the Israelis decide to continue what they are doing, because the difference is clear in the mind of the Syrian revolution. According to one of Shara's aides, between canceling the 1974 armistice agreement for security purposes, as the Israelis claim, and seeking to occupy Syrian territory in a manner that threatens the Syrian people's revolution and freedom, Al-Sharaa''s assistant staff speaks of the revolutionary factions as mujahideen factions in essence, and the existence of jihadist organizations, formations that Al-Shara'a and the leaders are making great efforts to subject to logic of building a state and a regular army. They continued, the meaning here is that Israel's aggression and expansion are a pretext and excuse in the hands of formations that are already skilled at fighting in rubble and destruction and under occupation, and therefore Israel must understand this option as well. And that wasn't the only thing. Al-Shara'a also told the delegations from Europe, your constant support for Israel had brought Iran to Lebanon and Gaza. You should tell your friends that continuing your steps against the Syrian people could easily turn into a jihadist issue against the Jews and their entity. This is in contrast to the fact that Al-Shara'a and his formations and factions read the bombings of the port in Tartus and Latakia and the airports and research centers in Damascus and Daraa as bombing civilian facilities and not the remnants of the ousted regime and its facilities. Shara'a wished that those who fund Israel would avoid testing the patience of the revolution, as he describes it, or quoted to be describing it, that now rules, which has toppled the deposed regime and driven out Iran, according to him, its revolutionary guards, Hezbollah, and various groups of Shiite militants. Therefore, they are factions that are now dedicated to fighting, and they will not adhere to those international rules of engagements, much if the Israelis insist on testing their patience or harming and obstructing their project to build the Syrian homeland. Shara also suggested that the Europeans should convince their allies in America that ensuring Israel's security in the Golan and on the border with Syria is not possible with the way the Israelis are acting. And they finished that article there. Now, this is a clear indication that in the background, there are many things happening that we don't hear about in the forefront, because at the end of the day, they want to rebuild their country. They're trying not to escalate the tone when it comes to Israel, and they want to build a solid state before having any adventures with any other country. Israel, on the other hand, feels or believes that, well, we cannot actually cooperate with any country that is run and governed by the people, because although they have peace treaties with Egypt and with Jordan, they only had peace treaties with the governments. They never had peace treaties with the people. The people of Jordan and the people of Egypt do not believe in the concept of Israel, and they believe that it's an occupying illegal entity. They're seeing what they're doing for the Palestinian people. Now imagine if the people actually rule the government, or an opposition that was there for so long fighting an oppressive government. How could Israel be dealing with them? So from an Israeli perspective, they need to take these actions to try and protect themselves. The question is, how long will they do so? Now, when it comes to the official statements, the Syrian leader, Al-Sharaa'S, he said that they will be taking diplomatic action. There were also warnings coming from Turkey. Israel views the Turkish presence and the Turkish influence inside of Syria as something very dangerous. And they also even claimed previously that this might lead to an escalation against Israel. Israel as well said that when it comes to Syria, we could be seeing a new formation of a front that could flip against Israel in coordination with countries like Iran, where the Syrian revolutionaries or the Syrian armed opposition was fighting Iran for so long. So the dynamic and the situation of Syria is changing very rapidly. Although the new Syrian rulers are trying to get a peaceful resolution and diplomatic solutions, Israel again in Syria proves what it is as an occupying, illegal, expansionist, terrorist entity that has no limits to its borders. They seek opportunities. They believe that they are entitled to far more than what they have. They follow a doctrine of our borders are where the last foot of our soldiers steps on. So from their perspective, they're seeing an opportunity and they're expanding. How long will that last? Will we have some sort of a resolution between the new Syrian government and Israel to ask Israel to retreat? Because now they're also still confronting the SDF and certain other movements to take control of the whole of the Syrian state. But again, Israel is a threat, and Israel will continue to be a threat for Syria, even if they do not have any aggressive approach towards Israel, or if they at least haven't declared it, but do intend to have any aggression against Israel in the future.